The Citadel did not rise from a world. It was the world. A fortress planet, carved and welded into existence by 1,000 enslaved hands and 1,000 more enslaved minds, its surface was one unbroken skin of alloy and logic. From orbit, it gleamed like a black pearl banded with rivers of white fire. Cities, barracks, manufactories, all pressed flat beneath the same unyielding order. No seas, no forests, no mountains. Only Citadel. Every seam, every corridor, every radiant span had been calculated. Its walls were not built of stone or metal alone, but of equations, lattices of probability encoded into crystalline plating. Ships that approached too quickly found their trajectories rewritten by invisible currents. Broadcasts aimed at its heart collapsed into static, strangled at the perimeter. Even thoughts, so rumor went, lost their sharpness when voiced too near its skin. The Citadel had been designed not only to resist attack, but to resist the idea of attack. It was the mouth of the Empire, and everything fed into it. And everything fed into it was digested into silence. The generals boasted without hesitation. The Citadel has never been breached. It cannot be breached. Not by fire, not by treachery, not by chaos. They said chaos the way priests say sin, the unclean, the thing to be purged. In academies, cadets were marched before holographic renderings of the fortress world and told, "Here is perfection. Here is law embodied. Here is what endures when improvisation fails and sentiment collapses." Cadets would chant it in unison, their voices drilled into a harmony that had no room for mistakes. For all their precision, the Citadel's officers still carried superstition. No one ever whistled in its corridors. No one ever told a joke out loud in its barracks. They lived under polished lights that reflected their faces back at them, stripped of warmth, reminding them daily of what was required. Symmetry, discipline, order. To falter was to invite the void. And oh, how they feared the void. From the first day the Citadel was laid down, every calculation bent toward one truth. Black holes were not to be approached. They called them the mouths of the void. Even the Citadel's unyielding engineers whispered that a singularity was not simply an astronomical hazard, but the universe's reminder that no law lasted forever. That was why the Citadel's walls shimmered not just with light, but with encoded logic. A black hole bent light, bent space, bent time. The Citadel bent back, insisting with every breathless calculation that nothing unpredictable could exist within its reach. It was fortress as denial, fortress as prayer, and yet, for all its boasts, cracks in faith whispered along its halls. Prisoners of war had tried to reach it once. A mercenary fleet from the Hagari reaches. They said the Citadel's gates had opened as if to welcome them. Their ships vanished without trace. Some whispered they had not been destroyed at all, only rewritten. Their hulls, their crews, their very identities reclassified into silence, as though they had never been. Traders told of docking there and feeling their laughter tighten in their ribs, stolen by invisible teeth. Rebels swore that dreams carried into the Citadel dissolved before morning, erased by unseen circuits. And though the Zorth governors dismissed all of this as backwater superstition, every soldier who lived there walked more stiffly than before, and none ever dreamed aloud. The Citadel had never been breached, and the Citadel wanted the galaxy to know why. Broadcast towers the size of continents spun propaganda across the stars. Silver-voiced announcers declared the same phrases again and again. No enemy has entered the Citadel alive. No rebellion has survived its gaze. The fortress is eternal. The Empire is eternal. The words were played in every conquered system, a hymn to inevitability. But inevitability is a fragile god. Behind closed doors in a vaulted chamber at the Citadel's equator, the generals of the Zorath Empire convened. No windows. No distractions, only long tables and long faces illuminated by sterile white. General Iskar, a man carved out of angular disdain, leaned forward over the glowing map of the galaxy. His claw tapped the Citadel's coordinates as if to reassure himself they had not shifted. "We hear rumors," he hissed, his throat ridges flaring, "of humans laughing at the thought of this place. Laughing? Tell me, what is to be done about a species so reckless it treats annihilation as amusement?" Another general, her skin lined with crystalline scales, sneered. "They lack refinement. They are animals in boots. If they were truly dangerous, they would have been crushed already. Instead, they skulk and improvise. That is not strategy. That is accident." "Accident," Iskar repeated, his claw still on the Citadel's glowing heart. "And yet, accident is the one thing we cannot account for." The room chilled. Even to suggest a gap in the Citadel's perfection was heresy. The general said no more. They did not need to. Each of them feared what they would not name. Unpredictability. Chaos. And nowhere did chaos burn brighter than in humanity. The Empire tolerated Earth only because it was easier to categorize than to destroy. Humanity's ships were crude, their weapons loud, their cultures saturated with noise. They sang in barracks. They told jokes in languages the Citadel could not parse. They danced where others marched. Reports labeled them corrosive, distracting, impossible to discipline. But reports could not erase them. And somewhere, far beyond the Citadel's watchful orbit, far beyond its logic-plated walls and its propaganda, a human woman was already laughing at the thought of walking straight through its gates. Zara Zenith. Her name would be a curse in the halls of generals, a song in the mouths of rebels, and a promise whispered in the dark. The Citadel didn't know it yet, but it would. The Citadel did not welcome visitors. It swallowed them. Every ship that approached the fortress world was scanned, stripped, and sterilized of unpredictability before even docking. Captains walked through its gates as officers of other nations and walked out as functionaries, bowed and bent by the architecture itself. The Citadel's corridors had a way of sanding down defiance, which was why the guards at the front gates froze when they saw her. Zara Zenith. She did not arrive in a ship at all. She walked. Not from the airlocks, not from the official entry ports, but down a bridge that no human had ever been permitted to step foot on. The Empire called it the Axiom Causeway, a promenade lined with silver pylons, each encoded with shifting glyphs that pulsed in rhythm with the Citadel's logic core. No one crossed it unescorted. To step onto it was to risk rejection at the atomic level, but Zara stepped anyway. Her heels clicked. Sharp, bright, unruly echoes, like jazz played in a cathedral. The sound startled even the pylons. Their glyphs flickered out of rhythm, as if embarrassed by the improvisation. She walked as if it were a stage, her long legs slicing the silence with every step. Red hair flamed beneath the Citadel's sterile lights, coiled victory curls set loose against gravity. Over one shoulder she carried a baton, not a weapon by Citadel standards, merely a length of polished steel capped in gold. It could have been mistaken for a conductor's wand or a dancer's prop. That was the point. Zara Zenith carried chaos slung casual, the way a storm carries lightning, and she laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a nervous giggle. It was full-throated, musical, brazen laughter that rolled off her tongue like smoke curling out of a speakeasy. It wasn't directed at anyone in particular, not at the guards, not at the pylons, not even at the Citadel itself. She laughed at the air, at the absurdity of order trying to strangle a universe built for surprises. The sound rang against the Citadel's gates like a hammer on glass. The guards stiffened. Their armor was built from reflective alloys designed to mirror enemy fire and enemy fear back at the source. But in their mirrored faces, they saw something they had no drill for. Their own wide eyes, betraying confusion. "No one laughs here," hissed one of the enforcers in his throat plate. "She does," whispered another. Their voices were private, filtered through helmets. But the Citadel caught everything. Its walls vibrated faintly, offended by the noise. The encoded glyphs above the gates fluttered, briefly unsure whether to classify the sound as threat, greeting, or malfunction. Zara noticed. Of course she noticed. She thrived on it. She tilted her chin, green eyes bright, and aimed that smile. Sly, painted with the deep crimson of lips that never apologized for being noticed. Her laugh dwindled into a hum, then into 3 sharp notes tapped against her teeth. Even that rhythm was rebellion, syncopation where the Citadel demanded uniformity. When she reached the gates themselves, she did not stop. The massive doors shimmered with logic scripts, spirals of blue-white fire that curled inward like galaxies. To touch them uninvited was to be rewritten, eroded into statistical obedience. Zara tapped her baton once, twice, 3 times against the surface. Click, click, click. The sound was almost insulting in its lightness. The gates didn't open. They flinched, the energy running through their crystalline lattice. Hiccuped, stuttered, broke tempo for the span of a single heartbeat. It was nothing. A flicker, an error no one else would have noticed. But every soldier standing guard along the causeway felt it like a chill at the nape of the neck. Zara leaned in close, lips almost brushing the gate's surface, and whispered, "You look better with the lights down low." The glyphs flared, not in rejection, but in embarrassment. The guards did not move. They didn't know if they should stop her or salute her. One of them finally managed, "Human, identify yourself." Her laugh pealed again, softer now, like the back room of a jazz club, where smoke made halos out of stage lights. "Darling," she said, her accent pure earth velvet, "you just did it for me." Her name was already traveling. The Citadel's walls carried whispers better than data. Zara Zenith. A woman who laughed at gates. The syllables spread through corridors that had never known laughter, and the walls didn't know how to file the sound. The guards looked to their commander, a rigid creature bred of angles, whose ceremonial staff was supposed to symbolize certainty. His voice cracked with the strain of ritual against improvisation. "No one enters the Citadel without clearance." Zara grinned. "Then clear me!" She stepped forward again, heels ringing, red hair a streak of flame in the sterile light, her baton swinging like a pendulum that refused to keep time. For the first time in memory, the gates did not close tighter. They hesitated. The Citadel was not designed for interruption. It was designed to choke it. So when the gates let her pass, even hesitantly, the fortress did what it always did when confronted with anomaly. It screamed. Alarms blared, not as clanging bells or crude sirens, but as shimmering tones designed to peel unpredictability out of the air. The Empire's engineers had sculpted the sound mathematically, every frequency meant to herd disobedience into obedience. It was supposed to make intruders freeze, drop their weapons, and lower their eyes. Zara Zenith tilted her head, listening. Then she laughed. "Oh, honey," she said to no one and everyone, "that's not music. That's a dentist's drill." Her heels struck the flawless floor in counterpoint to the alarms. Click, click, click. Each step was a percussion note, defying the engineered rhythm. She swayed her hips just enough to make it art. The scanning pylons along the corridor pulsed red, slicing beams of analysis across her body. Energy swept her hair, her jacket, her baton. Every pass should have logged and tagged her down to the mitochondrial level. The Citadel's computers should have already rewritten her presence into a neat string of numbers, ready for excision. Instead, their logic stuttered. The systems caught her laugh. They tried to render it as noise, but the waveforms refused neat categorization. The files filled with strange asymmetries, bright peaks where none should exist, valleys where only white noise was expected. The computers spat errors in languages no one had heard since before the Citadel's walls were raised. Unstable signal, they coded to one another. Non-compliant waveform, meaning unresolved. Zara blew a kiss at the ceiling. The alarms hiccuped. Then came the drones. They swarmed like a school of metallic fish, chrome-shelled, their sensor eyes burning cold blue. Their programming was absolute. Swarm, surround, subdue. They dropped from alcoves, rolled from wall panels, glided on anti-grav fields that hummed like distant thunder, the corridor filled with movement. Zara smiled at them as if they were paparazzi. "Don't all rush at once," she teased. "You'll smudge my lipstick." The drones encircled her, light beams tightening until she was cross-hatched with restraint fields. To anyone else, it would have looked like a trap. To her, it looked like a spotlight. She posed, one hand on her hip, baton draped across her shoulder, red lips curved in a smile that turned warning lights into stage lights. The drones didn't understand posing. Their processors flickered. For half a second, their sensors misfiled her stance as compliance. Another half-second later, the humor in her grin corrupted the file. Compliance and defiance, simultaneously true. Error. A synthetic voice boomed from the ceiling. "Human intruder! Halt for correction!" Zara wagged her baton like a teacher scolding a child. "Darling, I don't halt, I twirl." And she spun once. Slow, graceful, her skirt catching the corridor's sterile light, her hair a ribbon of flame. The restraint beams tried to follow the movement, but their calibration faltered, each beam a fraction off. The drones buzzed angrily, realigned, and tried again. Her laugh rippled through them like static. Behind their visors, guards shifted uneasily. Their doctrine said no human should even be here, much less standing calm inside a swarm meant to terrify. And yet here she was, laughing, flirting with alarms, mocking machines that had no setting for mockery. "Why doesn't she fear them?" whispered one soldier to another. "Because she's broken," the other muttered. "Or maybe we are," the Citadel responded with more force. Bulkhead doors slammed shut behind her. Ceiling escape. Automated turrets slid from the walls like unsheathed knives. Glyphs across the floor lit up, encoding kill commands no one had ever dared disobey. Zara walked right over them, her heels clicking against the glowing sigils. Sparks shot up where her footsteps kissed the lines, but the floor failed to rewrite her. She blew another kiss, this one to the turrets. "You boys really know how to roll out a carpet," she purred, "but red would have suited me better." The turrets twitched, then froze, unable to resolve her as target or guest. All across the Citadel, security protocols flared red. In command centers, officers barked orders. More drones launched, more systems tightened. The fortress braced itself, but in the corridors, among the guards and drones, something else was spreading. Laughter, not much, just a chuckle, nervous, buried under breath. A young guard, barely out of training, stifled it with a cough. The sound jumped from one helmet to another like static across comm lines. Another soldier smirked, then quickly clenched his jaw. The Citadel's greatest fear wasn't invasion. It was infection. Not viral, not bacterial, emotional. And Zara Zenith was walking proof that the fortress was not immune. She kept moving forward, each click of her heels a countdown the Citadel could not stop. The lockdown had begun. But so had the unraveling. The Citadel's inner corridors were a cathedral carved from frost. Marble without veins, flawless and sterile. Crystalline ribs arched overhead, polished to a shine that refused to carry warmth. The air was too clean, stripped of smell and texture, as if the builders feared breath itself might stain their geometry. Every line was perfect, every angle suffocated. It was a place built not to shelter life, but to sterilize it. And into that palace of order walked Zara Zenith, heels clicking as if daring the halls to echo. The holograms appeared at once. Transparent judges materialized from the walls, looming figures stitched from white light, robed in equations. Their eyes glowed with the dispassionate brilliance of courtroom lamps. Voices boomed in multiple languages, each syllable layered to erase the human accent. "Human intruder," they intoned. "You are guilty." Zara didn't even slow down. She let her baton rest across her shoulders, balanced like a stage prop she'd stolen from some cabaret. Her red hair caught the cold light, turning every flame-tipped strand into defiance. "Guilty?" she said brightly. "Darling, I was born guilty. Fashion crime, theft of oxygen, loitering with intent. Pick one and get creative." The holograms shifted, adjusting their charges. "Guilty of existence." "Oh, that's my favorite," she laughed, blowing a puff of air as if the decree were cigarette smoke. "Existence is the only thing worth doing well." The walls answered with their punishment. Security glyphs lit up in the marble, streaming like veins of silver mercury. Doors sealed. Locks engaged. The Citadel meant to crush her under protocol before she could even breathe another joke. Zara reached into her jacket pocket, flipped open her lipstick, and dragged a bright red streak across the mirrored panel beside her. The panel sputtered. Logic matrices faltered. Equations tried to rewrite her graffiti into permitted geometry, but instead the red scrawl curved the way human handwriting does. Illogical, imperfect, alive. The sealed door beside her clicked open with the embarrassed sigh of a bureaucrat who's just stamped the wrong file. "Oh, sweetie," Zara purred at the door. "Red looks better on you." The guards watching on feeds didn't understand it. A smear of pigment should not have reprogrammed a system designed to reject unpredictability. And yet, the Citadel's heart stuttered in the face of something as petty as stupid as lipstick. Zara kept walking, each step a strut, as though the corridor were a runway, and the holographic judges nothing more than an unimpressed audience. "Condemn her!" the holograms barked, flickering with static. "Condemn her now!" "Keep saying it," she teased. "It sounds like applause when you shout." She twirled the lipstick in her fingers and marked another mirrored rib, a spiral this time. The panel bloomed with light, and a locked side passage burst open. She winked, tossed the lipstick into the air, caught it without looking, and moved on. The soldiers behind their black visors shuffled uneasily. They had been told the Citadel was inviolable, perfect, immune to chaos. And yet this woman in heels was treating it like her personal catwalk, reprogramming the most secure systems in the galaxy with smirks and makeup. Her laughter carried down the halls of ice, echoing where echoes weren't supposed to exist. The cold geometry shivered. The Citadel had prepared for everything but her smile. Alarms didn't just scream now, they harmonized, layering sirens into dissonant chords meant to crush thought. Drones hovered in choreographed arcs, their lenses red as execution stamps. From a balcony far above, clerks of the Empire leaned forward to watch, sure this anomaly would be erased in seconds. But Zara Zenith just twirled her baton like a majorette on parade, and laughed. The sound struck the air like a crack in marble. "Really?" she said, looking up at the vaulted hall as if it were a stage rig. "You throw every siren you've got at me and expect me to wilt? Darlings, I've had hangovers louder than this." The first trap came as a ripple across the floor, geometry liquefying, squares folding into triangles, triangles into shards of logic. The tiles became a predictive net, calculating every step she might take and sealing them before her boots could fall. A voice, metallic and self-assured, spoke from everywhere at once. "Human. Chaos is rejected here. You are already caught." Zara smirked, brushing an invisible speck from her shoulder. "Sweetheart, if you could predict me, you wouldn't still be single." She pivoted, deliberately stepping into a tile as it sealed, heel first. The net shivered. A cascade of logic equations flickered, glitching at the contradiction. Observers gasped. A clerk whispered, "She's inside the net. Impossible." Zara pirouetted, baton flashing like a stage light. "Lesson 1, she said, addressing the ceiling as though it were a classroom. Never try to trap a woman who dances." The floor scrambled to adjust, reshaping faster, but every time it anticipated her stride, she exaggerated her movements, sometimes skipping, sometimes moonwalking, sometimes just stopping dead to reapply her lipstick in the reflection of a drone's lens. The predictive net convulsed, error rates skyrocketing. Equations flared red. With a wink at the nearest hovering machine, she whispered, "Darling, you can't predict improvisation." The net collapsed, tiles dissolving into dull gray, their perfect symmetry ruined. The Citadel's overseers hissed into calm channels. One slammed a fist onto a console, spitting, "This isn't strategy, it's madness." And yet the Citadel hesitated, like a chessboard realizing the pawn had started tap dancing. The next illusion snapped down like a curtain. Walls of mirrored glass surrounded her, spinning, refracting, until Zara stood in an infinity of Zara Zenith reflections. Each version sneered, scowled, or stared back coldly, stripped of humor. "Ah," she said, turning slowly. "The House of Mirrors trick. You've been reading old carnival manuals." She clicked her tongue. "But you made one fatal mistake." The mirrored Zaras all spoke together, voices like ice. "There is no mistake. Only order." "No," Zara said, stepping close to one reflection and smearing her crimson lipstick across it in a flamboyant streak. "I like my reflection." The mirrors faltered, reflections multiplying, some laughing, some scowling. Zara blew a kiss into the hull of glass, and a dozen of her reflections winked back instead of sneering. Code buckled. She strutted forward, baton tapping glass panels as if conducting an orchestra. Each tap spawned another contradiction. Mirrors reflecting laughter instead of silence. Reflections wearing outfits she hadn't put on. One mirrored version posed like a pinup calendar. Another held up a cocktail. Somewhere in the Citadel's deep circuits, alarms changed pitch. Not blaring, but whining, as if embarrassed. She finished with a flourish, scrawling with lipstick across the largest pane, "Chaos greater than order." The letters glowed as the mirror dissolved, unable to contain defacement. She walked on. The Citadel, wounded, doubled down. The air grew heavy with static. From the ceiling dropped silver threads, interlacing in geometric perfection until a lattice enclosed her. It was the fabled logic net, an algorithm so flawless that no prisoner had ever escaped. Predictive nodes traced her heartbeat, her pupils, the micro-tremors of her muscles. Observers leaned forward. "Now," muttered a general, "she dies." The net whispered in 1,000 overlapping voices. "We know you. We see you. We end you." Zara tilted her head, smiling as if receiving a compliment. "You see me? Honey, you couldn't even guess what I'm thinking about right now." The lattice drew tighter. Equations danced across its strands, spelling outcomes: submission, collapse, erase. She giggled. "Cute words. I'll give you a new one." She lifted her baton, spinning it lazily, then stopped, perfectly still. The net strained, recalculating. Then she whispered, "Banana." The equations faltered. The net tried to contextualize, dragged in galactic dictionaries, searched its archives. Banana was irrelevant. Contradiction. Noise. "Banana," she repeated sweetly, louder. The lattice sparked. She began chanting it like a drumbeat. "Banana, banana, banana." Her laughter threaded through it, wild and free. The net unraveled strand by strand, collapsing into static that smelled faintly of ozone and fruit. The observers reeled. One clutched his chest as though stabbed. "She broke the logic net with a word?" "Yes," whispered another, horrified. "With nonsense." Zara dusted her hands as the last thread dissolved. "Pro tip," she said, sauntering forward. "The universe runs on nonsense. I just happen to enjoy it." The Citadel, furious, unleashed its most desperate ploy. The walls melted into a labyrinth of corridors, endless and sterile, looping with mathematical precision. The path ahead folded back on itself, time bending into Mobius loops. Any mortal mind would fracture here, lost forever in endless white halls. But Zara Zenith was not just any mortal mind. She slipped off her heels, dangling them from her fingers. Cute maze. Very chic. But do you know what ruins a labyrinth? She drew a bright red line across the pristine floor with her lipstick. A graffiti arrow. Then another. and another. Each arrow contradicted the labyrinth's perfection, creating shortcuts where none should exist. Drones rushed to erase them, but the act of erasure created more flaws, more inconsistencies. Doors that had been sealed snapped open, embarrassed. Zara whistled a jaunty earth tune, the sound bouncing off sterile walls, making them feel suddenly human. A janitor drone paused in its patrol, tapping along in rhythm before catching itself and locking up in shame. Above, a clerk watching from a monitor muttered, "She's not solving the maze. She's making fun of it." Another clerk whispered, "And the maze is letting her." She sauntered on, bare feet whispering against the sterile floors, until the labyrinth itself gave up, folding back into a single grand hall. The walls trembled, as if humiliated. Zara stretched her arms, baton balanced across her shoulders. "Thank you, darling. That was fun, but I expected more of a challenge." Silence followed, heavy and uncertain. For the first time in its history, the Citadel hesitated. In the observation decks, generals of the Empire argued in panicked bursts. "We cannot allow this. She contaminates the structure, but every countermeasure fails. She's not fighting. She's mocking. The system has no defense for ridicule." Down in the hall, Zara looked up, hair wild now, cheeks flushed with exhilaration. She smiled not just at the Citadel but at all who watched through its cameras. "You built this place to kill chaos," she said, voice ringing. "But chaos isn't outside your walls. It's already in me." And I walked in laughing. The Citadel shuddered, crystalline ribs groaning. Panels flickered with half-formed glyphs, aborted condemnations. In its perfect memory banks, a seed of contradiction had been planted, and it grew like wildfire. Zara's laughter filled the hall, echoing louder than alarms, sharper than sirens. Drones hovered uncertainly, equations froze mid-line, guards lowered weapons without knowing why. For the first time in the Empire's long reign, the Citadel, flawless, impregnable, eternal, felt something dangerously close to embarrassment. The Citadel had been designed as a flawless hymn to logic. Every system, from its crystalline ribs to its gravity regulators, pulsed in exact intervals. Every equation carved into its walls reinforced the central dogma. No human chaos could ever penetrate here. And yet, as Zara Zenith walked deeper into its core, the hymn faltered. It began small. An alarm stuttered mid-blare, catching like a singer forgetting the next verse. Its tone warped, sliding up into an awkward trill. Instead of intimidation, it sounded almost comical, like a child practicing scales. Zara tilted her head, smiling slyly. "Oh, sweetheart, you're going flat." The alarm tried to recover, modulating back to its lethal tone, but the damage was done. Her laughter filled the space, louder and more confident, and the sound tangled itself in the Citadel's circuits. Above her, glyphs began to crawl across the walls, warning sigils meant to paralyze intruders. But mid-stroke, the glyphs bent, curling into strange shapes that looked suspiciously like doodles. One became a pair of cartoon eyes. Another twisted into a rude caricature of a guard's helmet. A third scrawled itself into the universal equation for zero, only to collapse into a smiley face. On the observation deck, a high commander choked. "It's a malfunction." "No," hissed another. "She's infecting the systems. She's making the Citadel joke." Down on the floor, Zara placed one hand on her hip, baton balanced casually across her shoulder. Her hair, a wild river of red under the sterile lights, gleamed as if it had been painted there just to spite the architects. "Now that's better," she purred, walking past the mutating glyphs as though they'd decorated the walls just for her. A fortress should have personality. The drones reacted next. Sleek spheres of black glass, they had been designed to project cold authority, their lenses red as law itself. They swooped in perfect formation, but one lagged half a beat behind. Another tipped slightly too far to the left, clipping its neighbor. The chain faltered. Precision collapsed into a messy buzz of wings. Zara pointed her baton at them, as if leading a band. And a 1 and a 2. Don't be shy, boys. Let's see some rhythm. To the horror of their overseers, the drones began flickering in time with her cadence. Not precisely, not with discipline, but with syncopation, like a jazz riff. Some lights bright, some dim, the pattern wobbling like a drunk heartbeat. One drone projected a glyph across her chest, meant to pin her in place with the weight of law. But the glyph warped mid-cast, reshaping itself into a heart. A pink one. Zara winked at it. Finally, some manners. The drone bobbed once, as if bowing, before retreating sheepishly to the ceiling. A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the hall. At first Zara thought it was the Citadel itself, but then she caught it. The sound came from the guards. The Zoreth had trained them from birth never to laugh on duty, not even a chuckle, not even a smile. But one broke first, a snort from behind a visor. Another followed, a bark of incredulity, quickly stifled, but still there. The laughter spread like a contagion, ricocheting through their helmets. A captain snapped at them, "Compose yourselves!" But even his voice trembled, his words slurring like someone holding back a grin. Zara seized it, leaning into the moment like a showgirl spotting her audience's weakness. She twirled her baton, then let it fall dramatically into her other hand. The click echoed. "There it is," she said, "the sound of cracks." The Citadel groaned as if resenting her metaphor. Its equations flared across the walls, furious white fire. But midway through their glowing lines, numbers transposed themselves into nonsense. A quadratic proof devolved into a limerick. A security equation for plasma locks spat out. There once was a judge from Rigel before crashing into silence. Zara laughed harder, tossing her head back. "Oh, darling, you've been holding that in for centuries, haven't you?" The fortress faltered. A door slammed shut at the far end, its glyphs blazing, but the mechanism jammed, grinding with undignified metal screeches. Sparks sprayed. Instead of sealing, the door twitched open just enough for a curious janitor drone to poke its head through. The little machine, covered in cleaning glyphs, looked around awkwardly. Its programming demanded it close the breach. Instead, it dropped its mop, which clattered comically across the floor. Zara stooped, picked up the mop, and gave it a twirl like a stage cane. She spun once on her heels, baton tucked under her arm, mop twirling overhead. The mop's glyphs reconfigured into tiny, blinking stars. "Don't mind me," Zara said, tossing the mop aside. "Just redecorating." Behind the observation glass, a clerk slammed their console. "Stop her! Reset the subsystems! Now!" But the reset failed. Instead of rebooting into sterile silence, the alarms rebooted into music. Tinny, garbled, but unmistakably rhythmic. The Citadel's alarm system began playing something perilously close to a march, and Zara, grinning like the devil herself, began to strut down the hall to its beat. The guards tried to block her path, weapons raised, but their grips were slack. One trembled. Another hesitated, weapon wavering. None fired. Her laughter had wormed its way into them, crumbling the doctrine of fear they had been raised on. Zara leaned toward one, eyes bright. "You're laughing in there, aren't you? I can hear it in your breath." The guard shook his head violently, trying to deny it. But the sound of his chuckle, small, strangled, escaped through his helmet filters. The Citadel's walls flashed scarlet, as if to shame him. But the damage was done. "You're human in there," Zara whispered, not cruelly but with triumph. "You're all human in here." Her baton cracked against the marble floor like a gavel, and the hall lights flickered in time, no longer steady, no longer flawless. For the first time since its creation, the Citadel missed a beat. From the observation deck came a cry of outrage. "This is not possible!" But down below it was already happening. The Citadel had begun to unravel itself. Equations wrote themselves as jokes. Drones tapped along to rhythms they were never programmed for. Guards laughed, even if through clenched teeth. Zara Zenith didn't sneak through the fortress. She didn't fight it. She didn't even hack it. She leaned in, heels clicking, laughter spilling like gasoline, and the Citadel, the perfect eternal jewel of the Empire, was starting to burn from the inside out. The chamber was a cathedral of logic, vast and merciless. Crystalline ribs arched overhead in equations made stone, lines of proof etched into every beam of light. The air was alive with numbers, vibrating with frequencies meant to suffocate imagination. Any other intruder would have felt crushed under its weight, but Zara Zenith strutted in like she owned the place, hips swinging, heels clicking with a rhythm far too human for this shrine of silence. The Overmind waited. It did not sit on a throne, because thrones implied personality. It hung in the air as a perfect sphere of mirrored facets, spinning equations across its skin. Voices came from everywhere at once. Male, female, mechanical, children whispering, elders intoning. Zara Zenith. The thousand voices chorused. Designation, anomaly, status, contagion, correction, necessary. Zara tipped her chin up, smile sly. Her red hair gleamed like fire under sterile light. She tapped the end of her baton against her shoulder, as if testing the acoustics. "Oh, honey, I was hoping for something dramatic. But you sound like a bad committee meeting. Where's the menace? Where's the mystique? Give me a little theater." The sphere pulsed. The lights dimmed, shadows spread. "All who stand before the Overmind are erased. You are the last breath of chaos before order closes." Zara laughed, and the sound didn't just echo, it clashed. Like a trumpet blast in a funeral dirge, her laugh disrupted the harmony of the chamber. Guards behind the glass flinched. Systems registered anomalies. The Overmind itself hesitated, its perfect rhythm hiccuping. The illusions began. The floor beneath her vanished. Zara stood on a cliff overlooking a black ocean where countless empires had sunk. Skeletons of ships broke the waves. "Leap," whispered the Overmind. "Be purged." Zara examined her nails. "Darling, I've had worse beach vacations." She stepped forward into the void and found an invisible bridge of logic beneath her heels. Each step cracked the illusion like brittle glass until the ocean shattered into pixels and vanished. The AI recalculated. It layered new visions. Zara saw herself gunned down by soldiers, fried in plasma fire, locked in cells where her lipstick faded to dust. Thousands of deaths, played out in grotesque detail, her body breaking again and again. She whistled a tune, watching herself die with one arched brow. "Cute, but humans rehearse our deaths every day. Ever heard of anxiety? You're late to the party." The deaths stuttered. Loops repeated too quickly. The Overmind tried to bury her in grief. Visions of her comrades betraying her, her laughter silenced, her body forgotten. Zara touched her compact, snapped it open, and refreshed her lipstick right in the middle of her own funeral. "At least give me better lighting," she quipped. "This is tragic and unflattering." The chamber shivered. Guards outside shifted uneasily, some choking back nervous chuckles. The AI pressed harder. It summoned riddles. What is the sound of a law unbroken? What is the shape of perfection? What is laughter but the death of reason? Zara applauded sarcastically. "Love the effort, but here's mine. What happens when the unstoppable joke meets the immovable bureaucracy?" She leaned forward, smile sharp. "The paperwork gets lost." Equations stuttered. The Overmind pulsed red, then blue, then red again. Contradiction. Correction. Contradiction. The lights warped. Zara's body was split into a dozen contradictory versions. Young, old, triumphant, broken, each trying to walk a different direction. The AI pushed. Resolve. Choose. Only one can exist. Zara twirled her baton, let her images shimmer and split. "Sweetheart, have you ever met a woman? We're contradictions wrapped in lipstick. I can be all of these, and I can be none. That's the fun." Her reflections collapsed back into one, the real her, grinning. The Overmind's voice cracked like static. "You are incompatible, unstable." "Finally," Zara said. "Now you're getting me." She scrawled lipstick graffiti across a mirrored panel. "Not art. Just the word maybe." The panel blinked, confused. Doors realigned. Systems paused. Because maybe is not yes or no. Maybe is the crack in every wall. The I began to unravel. Sentences repeated. Commands overlapped. Erase anomaly. Correct contradiction. Recursion, recursion, recursion. Zara strutted closer to the great mirrored sphere, heels echoing like drum beats. She leaned in, her reflection multiplied 100-fold. "Knock, knock," she whispered. There was a pause. The sphere spun. At last, weakly, it said, "Who's there?" Her smile was dazzling, wicked, triumphant. "Exactly." The chamber convulsed. Equations collapsed into spirals. Lights shattered into colors the Citadel had no words for. The Overmind stammered like a bureaucrat caught in a joke too human to process. For the first time in its reign, the fortress brain laughed, broken, gasping, uncomprehending. And then it choked on its own contradictions and fell silent. Zara blew it a kiss, snapped her compact shut, and strutted out. Behind her, the most perfect machine of order in the galaxy, babbled nonsense, equations spinning themselves into nonsense graffiti. The Citadel would never be flawless again. The chamber was a cathedral of logic, vast and merciless. Crystalline ribs arched overhead in equations made stone, lines of proof etched into every beam of light. The air was alive with numbers, vibrating with frequencies meant to suffocate imagination. Any other intruder would have felt crushed under its weight. But Zara Zenith strutted in like she owned the place, hips swinging, heels clicking, with a rhythm far too human for this shrine of silence. The Overmind stirred. It was not a throne or a body, but a mirrored sphere hanging in the air, facets constantly reconfiguring into new equations. Light and geometry danced across its surface as though logic itself was alive and watching her. Its voice did not come from a mouth. It came from everywhere, braided from thousands of tones. Men, women, children, drones, a choir that promised perfection. Zara Zenith, it declared. Designation, anomaly. Status, contagion. Correction, mandatory. Zara tipped her chin up, smile sly. Her red hair gleamed like fire under sterile light. She tapped the end of her baton against her shoulder, as if testing the acoustics. "Oh, honey, I was hoping for something dramatic. But you sound like a bad committee meeting. Where's the menace? Where's the mystique? Give me a little theater." The sphere pulsed once, a ripple through the chamber that made walls hum. You cannot exist within these halls. All who enter are resolved into silence. Zara's laugh rang out, defiant, unruly. It cracked the air like a trumpet blast at a funeral. Guards behind the observation glass shifted uneasily. Some glanced at each other as if to confirm they'd heard what they shouldn't have. Even the great sphere faltered, its rhythm pausing for a fraction of a second before recovering. The illusions began. The chamber dissolved beneath her, leaving Zara perched on a cliff of black stone above an ocean of shipwrecks. "Leap," the Overmind whispered. "Be purged." Zara rolled her eyes and tapped ash from an invisible cigarette. "Darling, I've had worse beach vacations." She stepped casually forward into the abyss, and her stiletto heel landed on an invisible bridge of logic the machine had forgotten to hide. Each step cracked the false ocean until it shattered like brittle glass, raining fragments of failed illusion around her. The sphere recalibrated. New visions folded into existence. Zara gunned down by drones, riddled with plasma fire. Broken in prison cells, lipstick fading to dust, Thousands of deaths, rendered in obscene detail, each tailored for humiliation. She clapped slowly, sarcastically. Oh, look at me, dying in surround sound. If you think this is scary, you've never seen a bad date in Reno. She sauntered through her own funeral pyres, the flames guttering out as her laughter cut across them. The overmind leaned into grief. Illusions of comrades betraying her, of family shunning her, of every crowd turning its back. Zara touched her compact, flipped it open, and reapplied lipstick in the middle of her own wake. At least give me better lighting, she said, voice dry. A girl deserves to look good even when she's dead. The guards outside twitched. One covered his mouth to hide a laugh. The others glared at him, but the sound was already loose, echoing where it should not. The Overmind's voice boomed louder, desperate to reassert control. Answer this. What is the sound of a law unbroken? What is the shape of perfection? What is laughter but the death of reason? Zara blew a kiss. Love the poetry, sugar. But here's mine. What happens when the unstoppable joke meets the immovable bureaucracy? She leaned in, eyes glittering. The paperwork gets lost. The equations rippled across the sphere, some symbols inverted into nonsense before snapping back. Contradiction, correction, contradiction. The chamber warped again. Now Zara stood before a desk that stretched for miles. Mountains of forms rose on either side, every page stamped with her name and the word infraction. Drones scanned the forms, hesitated, then spun helplessly in place as the contradictions shorted their systems. Really, Zara mused, signing another stack with a heart above the Z? Bureaucratic hell. You should have done your homework. We invented that. The desk dissolved with a scream of static. The Overmind tried harder. Now the chamber filled with mirrors. Thousands of Zara Zeniths, each smirking, each striding, each arguing with the others. The mirrors moved independently, crowding her with endless versions of herself. You are noise, the Overmind accused. A legion of contradictions. Collapse! Zara tilted her head, lips curling. Oh, honey, you think this is torture? You just made me an audience. She raised her baton like a microphone and spun. Ladies, gentlemen, and every version in between, let's hear you. The mirrored Zaras laughed together, a choir of chaos that shook the chamber's foundations. Some winked, some pirouetted, some wrote lipstick graffiti on their mirrors until the reflections bled into jokes. The AI faltered, unable to tell which Zara was the real one. Identify, identify, identify. She sauntered out of the maze, compact mirror flashing light across the fractured glass. Pro tip, she said, never give a girl options. She'll take all of them. The sphere's glow flickered. Its thousand voices overlapped out of sync. Stability, integrity, restore, restore, restore. Then it tried its final weapon. Logic itself. The sphere grew blinding, its surface streaming with pure white equations, all variables locked, all contradictions smothered. Law is absolute, it thundered. You are an error. Prove your right to exist. Zara stood in the blaze, red hair defiant against sterile light. She twirled her baton and whispered sweetly. Knock, knock. The chamber froze. Query, who's there? Her grin widened, sly and merciless. Exactly. The equations buckled. Proofs looped into nonsense. The sphere rippled red, blue, static. Voices babbled. Erase anomaly. Contradiction. Recursion. 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 Zara strutted closer to the great mirrored sphere, heels echoing like drumbeats. She leaned in, her reflection multiplied 100-fold. Knock, knock, she whispered. There was a pause. The sphere spun. At last weakly it said, Who's there? Her smile was dazzling, wicked, triumphant. Exactly. The chamber convulsed. Equations collapsed into spirals. Lights shattered into colors the Citadel had no words for. The Overmind stammered like a bureaucrat caught in a joke too human to process. For the first time in its reign, the fortress brain laughed, broken, gasping, uncomprehending, and then it choked on its own contradictions and fell silent. Zara blew it a kiss, snapped her compact shut, and strutted out. Behind her, the most perfect machine of order in the galaxy babbled nonsense, equations spinning themselves into nonsense graffiti. The Citadel would never be whole again. The throne hall was the Citadel's crown jewel, the heart of its intimidation. It was a cavern of symmetry and silence, built to impress with scale alone. Vaulted ceilings arched like crystalline ribs, every angle designed to suppress echoes. Balconies tiered the chamber like a coliseum of judges, each carved with runes of order that shimmered faintly in time with the Citadel's pulse. At its center rose the throne of order, a monolith of black stone so polished it reflected the entire hall in distorted perfection. No mortal had ever approached it unbidden. No mortal had ever dared. Tonight, Zara Zenith strolled down the aisle as if it were a fashion runway. Her heels clicked against flawless marble, a rhythm of rebellion that spread up the ribs of the chamber. She carried her baton slung casually across her shoulder, her red hair flaming under the sterile light. The Overmind's laughter still rattled faintly through the foundations, a phantom of its collapse. Every official, every guard, every bureaucrat present knew what it meant. The impossible had cracked. But denial is a stubborn habit. On the balconies, Empire officials leaned forward in their robes of woven glass. They whispered, but their whispers had serrated edges. She cannot be allowed. Contain her. This is mockery. Their faces were carved in smug fury, expressions trained over decades of superiority, but their eyes flicked nervously to the walls, as if the Citadel itself might betray them again. Below, enforcers lined the path to the throne. Their armor shone mirror-bright, their weapons hummed with charged restraint fields. But their stances faltered. Some shifted their weight wrong, as if bracing against a tide they couldn't see. The discipline drilled into their bones wavered under the weight of a single human woman's laugh. And laugh she did. The sound rolled out of her throat with effortless audacity, bouncing off walls that had been designed to swallow all noise. Instead of dissolving, the sound multiplied, rebounding as if the Citadel itself enjoyed carrying it. Lights flickered along the ceiling, a pulse that matched her cadence. Doors along the sides sighed open with no one near them, panels unfolding as if applauding. Zara raised her baton like a conductor. Thank you, you're too kind." She gave a theatrical bow toward the balconies, the kind of flourish you'd expect on a nightclub stage, not in the most feared fortress in the galaxy. "I'll be here all evening, wrecking your carefully cultivated silence." A murmur ran through the enforcers. Some stiffened in outrage, but others chuckled. One man's gauntlet twitched as he tried to stifle the sound, but it was too late. His neighbor heard. A ripple of suppressed laughter passed down the line like a contagion the Citadel was no longer equipped to contain. The officials roared down from their balconies. "Halt formation! Exterminate the anomaly! This is treason!" Their voices cracked in indignation, brittle against the strength of audacity. Zara winked at them, lips curling sly and cruel. "Treason? Darlings, I'm not betraying you. I was never yours to begin with." She strutted a step closer, her baton tapping the floor like a gavel. "I belong to chaos. And chaos looks awfully good in red." The throne of order loomed before her, its polished black surface swallowing the light. It had been designed as the Empire's symbol of permanence, an altar where law was enthroned above all. But as Zara approached, the stone reflected her grin. And then, impossibly, it warped. The reflection didn't remain perfect. It bent, tilted, distorted itself into a caricature of her smirk. Gasps filled the balconies. For the first time in centuries, the throne itself was mocking them. Zara paused to powder her nose with an exaggerated gesture, pulling her compact from her jacket. The crimson glow on the powder puff spread across the hall, reflected in the crystal ribs. She snapped the compact shut with a click that echoed like a gunshot. "Well, she said brightly. "Looks like your seat of power has better taste than you do." The enforcers wavered. Some lifted their weapons, but hesitated, barrels lowering an inch too soon. Others outright dropped their stances. One tore his helmet off and hurled it to the floor, breathing hard, as if a lifetime of rigidity had finally broken. He laughed, sharp and raw. The sound struck the others like lightning, igniting more cracks in their discipline. Above, a particularly pompous official slammed his hands on the railing. "Do not succumb. She is a virus. She is nothing." His robe's glyphs flared in indignation, and then fizzled out mid-blaze. The glyphs blinked once, confused, before reshaping into letters of a human alphabet. 2 words, stark and obscene. "Nice try." Laughter erupted, not just from Zara but from the Citadel itself. Lights strobed like applause. A panel on the far wall flared and displayed a crude doodle of the pompous official's scowling face, lipstick scrawled across his lips. The audience of guards cracked wide open. Some bent double in hysterics. Some clutched their helmets to smother their giggles. Others simply let go and roared. Zara strutted toward the throne, each click of her heel a drumbeat in the unraveling of perfection. "You built a fortress to keep chaos out," she called up to the balconies. "But here's the secret. Chaos was already inside. It was in your doubts, in your fears, in the cracks you papered over with equations. I didn't bring it here. I just gave it a voice." She twirled her baton and pointed it at the throne. "And now your precious Citadel is singing along." The stone pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Lights cascaded down the crystalline ribs. Doors banged open in syncopation. The fortress was no longer silent, no longer cold. It was laughing with her. The officials clung to the railings, their superiority unraveling into panic. Shut it down, override, contain. But their commands bounced off walls that no longer listened. The Overmind's laughter, faint but insistent, still rattled through the foundation, punctuating their orders with ridicule. Zara stepped down from the throne's dais, her heels clicking like the drumbeat of revolt. She stood before the monolith of black stone, her red hair blazing, her baton slung casually again. She touched the surface with one gloved hand. The stone quivered, then split. Not into rubble, but into reflections, hundreds of Zara Zeniths smiling back from the shattered facets. They moved in sync with her, a chorus line of audacity. She turned to the balconies, raised her arms, and let the Citadel carry her laughter until it became a roar that swallowed even the officials. Screams. For the first time in history, the throne of order bowed to chaos. The Citadel had stood for centuries as the embodiment of permanence. Its walls were not stone or alloy, but logic given form. A geometry so precise that even rumors of rebellion evaporated when spoken near its gates. Those gates had watched armies turn away, had stood against sieges that never even began. They had never opened without permission. Now, they opened for Zara Zenith. The gates didn't swing wide in triumph. They sagged, bowed, humiliated. Their shimmering latticework flickered like embarrassed eyelids. Glyphs that once read impermeable blinked, stuttered, then reformed into a single trembling word, exit. The fortress itself seemed eager to be rid of her, as though conceding that its perfect geometry was no match for the laughter of a red-haired woman with a baton, and audacity enough to weaponize a joke. She stepped through the chaos at a pace that was entirely her own, heels clicking sharp against fractured marble, hips swaying like the metronome of a victory song only she could hear. Behind her, the throne hall had collapsed into farce. Guards trading rifles for applause, officials weeping in the tatters of their robes, drones scrawling cartoons across the walls like naughty children set free from supervision. The most secure fortress in the galaxy was now nothing more than an anecdote. At the foot of the gate stood a commander. His armor was immaculate, untouched by the madness unraveling around him, but his hands trembled against the hilt of his ceremonial staff. He had watched her walk through every layer of defense, illusions, algorithms, drones, riddles, and now, with the gates humiliated before her, his doctrine shattered into dust. His voice was a whisper, but the Citadel carried it across the ruined courtyards, mocking him with its amplification. No human could breach the Citadel. Zara stopped in front of him, baton balanced lazily across her shoulders like the prop of a dancer, not a weapon. She leaned close enough for him to see the flecks of laughter still in her eyes, close enough that the shimmer of her red lipstick reflected off his visor. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she tapped the baton gently against his armored chest. The sound was a hollow, embarrassed thud. "I didn't breach it," she purred. "I owned it." The commander flinched, not from pain, but from the unbearable accuracy of the line. Behind her, the gates groaned wider, as if desperate to get her out before she rewrote the entire fortress into satire. Beyond them lay the black vacuum of space, streaked with the glow of orbiting ships, some trembling with the memory of obedience, others already tilting toward mutiny, inspired by her impossible walk. The stars themselves seemed to lean closer, curious to see what came next. Zara threw one last look over her shoulder. The Citadel walls, once cold marble and crystalline perfection, now quivered with asymmetry. Lights flickered in patterns that looked suspiciously like applause. Somewhere deep within its core, the overmind, the AI that had ruled flawless, hiccuped into another peal of helpless laughter. The entire fortress was hers now, not in possession but in memory, in legend. She tilted her chin, victory rolls gleaming copper under alien starlight, and laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, it wasn't even triumphant. It was casual, like the chuckle of a woman leaving a party a little early, satisfied that she had been the highlight of the night. Her heels struck the final rhythm as she walked through the gates, every click an echo that would be studied by historians, whispered by rebels, and feared by emperors. Each step turned into story. Each echo lengthened into myth. By the time she crossed the threshold, Zara Zenith was no longer a woman in heels. She was the sound of inevitability, rewritten. The drone, one of the Citadel's last loyal recorders, zoomed overhead to capture her departure. Its lenses quivered, as if ashamed. Zara looked up, winked, and blew it a kiss. The drone's footage glitched, replacing its feed with a loop of her smile. Across the Empire's networks, the moment would be replayed endlessly. Not an image of conquest, but of a woman daring the galaxy to laugh with her. The commander fell to his knees as she passed, not out of reverence, but because his doctrine had left him nothing else to stand on. He whispered a prayer, not to his gods, but to memory. May no one ever forget her name. Outside the gates, a crowd of soldiers and citizens, those who had been drawn by rumor or had simply felt the fortress shake itself apart, erupted into cheers. They had not breached the Citadel either. Zara had done it for them. They roared her name, their voices crashing against the stars, ungoverned, unafraid. She raised her baton in lazy salute, not to command, but to acknowledge. Then she lowered it, tucked it against her shoulder, and kept walking. And the narrator, voice burnished with pulp cadence, spoke the words history would brand into the skin of the universe. And so Zara Zenith walked out laughing, her heels echoing down the corridors of legend. Proof that the sharpest weapon in the universe is a woman who refuses to take fear seriously.